So let's see what Adam has to say.
Joe Rosen asks, "Is there an early or modern film you would have loved to have worked on?" I I I am drawn towards the high detail spaceships. Um,
He did I probably get roasted if I forget this, but he did work, I believe, on one of the original Star Wars films. Uh, one or more of the original Star Wars films. So, like, he got his start in the business doing like space sci-fi. So I can absolutely see him loving doing the high detail work of spaceships and sci-fi. Is it low? Okay, I'll bring you up. Tell me, let me know if it's still too low.
among the greatest spaceships ever designed, at the top of this list is always the Millennium Falcon.
Does that
Joe
sound better? Does it
Johnston's
sound good now?
amazing hamburger. Just, just. But below the Millennium Falcon, I love the ET mothership
Okay.
and the Close Encounters mothership.
How's that? Is that any
Those
better?
two spaceships, they are so beautiful. I've seen both in.
The difference between yeah, well, I've kind of got the game. Okay, good. I had to play around with the settings for both the browser and for my OBS. Okay, good, good. I'll back this up a little bit in case we miss a few things here. There we go.
Love the ET mothership and the Close
Okay.
Encounters mothership. Those
Eh,
two spaceships, they are so beautiful. I've seen both in person several times. Um, they are spectacular, spectacular constructions. And when I look up really close, I feel I feel a pull, I feel a draw. I want to be in that room in the 80s.
I will say one of my favorite spaceships of all time, sci-fi, because I love sci-fi. Um, and as if I were to have to put into like my top 5 spaceships, this is going to be no particular order, but probably like my top 5 spaceships of all time. Millennium Falcon would be one of them. I love the Millennium Falcon. It is such an iconic ship, and of course, what was done with the ship in the movies is just amazing. Uh, which is probably what made the Millennium Falcon such an iconic ship. Uh, the other one is the TARDIS. So, for those of you who don't know, I used to be a huge Doctor Who fan. I stopped being a Doctor Who fan after the first season of Jodie Whittaker's run, and after that I just stopped. Prior to that, I was a huge Doctor Who fan, and I love the TARDIS. I think the TARDIS is easily one of the most recognizable and iconic spaceships in film and TV history. Uh, the Enterprise from Star Trek. Now, which Enterprise? That is actually a very tough question because I am torn between the original Enterprise, Kirk's Enterprise, from both the TV show and the film, or the Next Generation's Enterprise with Picard and Riker. Uh, I am really torn between the two of them because I like them both. I'd say if you had to twist my arm, I'd probably say the Next Generation Enterprise, the NCC 1701D. Twist my arm, I would say the Next Generation Enterprise. It's, I just had no, there was another one I'm thinking of. Oh my goodness, it just went out of my head. Anyway, I'm waffling on here. But yeah, I mean, I love me some classic. We, of course. And you know what? Next Generation is when Star Trek as a series was written to be interesting and thought provoking without being preachy. That era Star Trek, which I feel that era, which I feel encompasses Star Trek Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Star Trek Voyager. Those three, I encompass those three within that era of Star Trek. Was the last generation of Star Trek, I think, that didn't reach at you. Um, the movies I'm kind of putting in their own separate little thing. Oh, now, now you're asking me a question because there are just so many to go through. The one that pops into my head, um, not because of what happens in the episode, but because of the overall implications of it. And for the life of me, I cannot remember the title of it. I was never good with remembering episode titles. Um, so you may or may not know this one. It was where an alien probe uh, sort of forces Picard to live out another person's life on a planet that is now dead, I believe, because of solar radiation. Because I think it was like an ozone depletion message in the episode, although it was done very subtly. He's forced to, yes, yep, exactly right. It's one where he ends up with the flute. He has to live he lives another person's entire life. I'm thinking it started when when the individual was probably supposed to be early to mid 30s, and then he lives this entire person's life. Um, and has family, but he has an entire life, and this person's memories, which there's a little bit of how the hell did this happen, given that the probe that was launched to cause this was actually launched during this person's lifetime. So how could he have lived that moment where he's watching the probe be launched and the rest living out the rest of his life before he dies if the probe launch that carries it. It's a little bit of artistic license there, but I'm inclined to forgive it. Um, it's like the implication that he lived a dead man's life and he was able to understand the culture and see how this society fell. And not because of any, political reasons or for reasons of war. It was something beyond their control because their ozone layer depleted for whatever the reason was. And there was nothing anyone could do. And I felt like that was such a powerful episode because of the overarching story in its entirety. That's probably easily one of my favorite episodes. Um, he did. When he was dating, when Kurt was dating one of the science officers. Um, she was a musician. She had she played piano, and so he's dating her. He's kind of sort of courting her, and she brings him to a Jeffries Tube junction. Breaks out her. She has like a little roll-out piano, kind of like a mini version of something that looked like something you honestly could get at like FAO Schwartz back in the day. But she rolls out this piano to play, and he has brought along his flute, and the two of them play a duet with him playing the one tune that he knows from living this past life on the flute, and she joins in with him with her piano as an accompaniment, and they do a duet. So yeah, that's when he played the flute later. Yeah, I mean, and that was kind of from the series perspective, that was kind of a deep-ish cut. And this was back when series, they would take elements from their previous episodes. Yes, that was also a good one. I'm here's the thing, music. We could talk about the various Star Trek episodes all day long because the thing with these episodes, the thing with the Next Generation is this is back when writing was done well because it actually wanted to tell a thought provoking story where it challenged the audience to look at something and to examine it critically with their own eyes and with their own mind. They weren't saying, oh, you have to think this way. It was, here's a situation. Obviously, the characters in the story have to go in one direction, but the stories would challenge you as to, is this the right way to do things? This was back when writing was writing. You know, we haven't seen that we haven't seen that level of writing in 20 years at least. And people, I mean, if television shows and movie studios started doing scripts like that, if they sort of dialed it back to the mid to late 90s style of writing in these dramas, oh my God, they would be lauded as some of the greatest writers of all time right now because people are desperate for that kind of writing again. They really are. They want to be challenged. They don't want to be talked down to. You know, people and yeah, I will say I can't speak for the entire viewing audience because there is plenty of individuals in the modern viewing audience that don't want to be challenged, that they want to be fed, that they want to, I want you to represent me in movies. But I don't think that they're a majority. I think the majority of the viewing audience likes to be challenged a little bit, where the modern viewing audience likes to sort of think about and maybe try and work out what's happened, you know, something, uh, um, you know, they like sort of playfully grappling with the hard questions in any given show. And we've lost that. And if they could bring that back, holy cow. Like these writers would be set for life with work if they were able to do that. And a studio actually hiring them to do it. That's the key. Um, it's just something I wish. Yeah, I wish we'd still see and we still had. And I suppose there's a chance. But kind of getting off topic here, but that's good. I like kind of going off topic and going off on tangents. That's great. Um, let's see what else Adam likes to what wants to work on.
Working on those pieces. I think the model maker from those early days that
Hmm.
I know the most is Bill.
Yeah, you're not wrong, music. And as much as I hate to say it, you are not wrong. The risk is not something that studios, well, what they perceive as risk is not something that they're willing to take, amongst other factors. Yes.
George, who went on to become an amazing effects director at ILM, still a wonderful model maker. And when I crack open like an old Cinefex and look at pictures of the Blade Runner crew and see Bill in his early 20s working on those models, it's like I just want to go to there. I want to be in the room working on the city streets of Blade Runner, the mothership from E.T. It's all Star Wars films. I don't want to work on any early Star Trek films for some reason. Well, I mean, the Star Trek aesthetic, it just doesn't move me quite like the Star Wars aesthetic does.
And I think I know why, because Star Wars aesthetics are probably too clean for Adam. Adam likes the dirtier, grungier aesthetics that you get with Star Wars, with Blade Runner, because it allows you to become more detailed. Yeah, you may say that here in a few seconds, but I betcha that's why he likes working on the Star Wars and Blade Runner and like aliens. I'm just throwing stuff out here now. Why he likes those aesthetics because when you get a genre that is dirtier and grungier, it gives you more opportunity for those really cool, neat little details that you can put into your design that you're not going to see in an environment like with Star Trek because Star Trek is just simply too clean. It's too neat. It's too pretty. It's you know, when it comes to detail work, uglier is kind of better. uglier gives you more opportunities to be creative than pretty, neat, and clean does, honestly.
Um, and so yeah, you're asking me for my like fantasy camp list of movies I would want to work on. It's the ones that move me aesthetically. Um, yeah, Empire, right? It's Empire. That's the one I would want to work on.
It-
It's a great question. Um,
What about modern films?
mm, Modern films that I wanted to work on.
Lord of the Rings.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Lord Norm is reminding me about Lord of the Rings. Yeah, yeah.
Now, is he talking about the original Lord of the Rings or the Rings of Power? I'm guessing he's talking about the original Lord of the Rings because that, yeah, you can do a lot with the original Lord of the Rings. For Rings of Power, I never watched it, but from what I saw, like the costuming design looked like it was something out of Spencer's Gifts or Hot Topic. It was pretty bad looking.
100%. I totally would have wanted to work on Lord of the Rings. And there was almost a trajectory. When I first got to Industrial Light and Magic in the spring of 1998, there was above one of the phones in the main model shop
All right, let's continue.
a small piece of paper that said, uh, if you're interested in moving to New Zealand to work with Weta Workshop, they're spooling up on Lord of the Rings. And I
Okay.
remembered investigating it. I had I had I had I how do I say this? I knew that I was going to have children when I was first working at ILM. My kids were born. Wait, no, not quite, not quite. Shortly after I was working at ILM, I had kids. My boys were born in '99. I'd started at ILM in spring of '98. And so by the time I was thinking seriously about New Zealand, which I loved the idea of, what a workshop, which I loved the idea of, I had already seen Meet the Feebles and Brain Dead. I was a big fan of Peter Jackson's because of all of the reasons. And I was thinking, oh, Lord of the Rings sounds totally amazing. But the logistics of moving me and my new family from San Francisco to New Zealand was too onerous for me to consider at that moment in time. But yeah, that could have been a whole nother trajectory because I seriously considered it for a couple of weeks.
What's so fascinating is when you think Adam Savage, you'd think more sci-fi as opposed to fantasy. When I think about, all his works, I mean, for God's sake, he has the Iron Man armor right back here. So it's like I never really think of Adam as being a fantasy kind of geek. I always thought of him as a sci-fi geek because that's usually when he talked about, like where he's, talking about where he worked with Industrial Lights and Magic, Lucas's company. Um, it's interesting. I should research into what other movies he did big work on because ever since he started on MythBusters, I don't think he was working with any special effects companies anymore. He was kind of in business for himself. Oh, he absolutely does. He gives and Adam Savage is like a nerd geek god in the nerd and geek circles. He is a god in those circles because he is just so you know especially with particularly because Mythbusters was so popular. Because Mythbusters was so popular, he was able to be elevated like this because Mythbusters was interesting for people outside of the nerd space. So like anybody can get into Mythbusters because it was cool. Adam himself was funny. It was very interesting because it combined geekiness with interesting science that was accessible to the average person. And Adam himself is like a nerd and a geek. And so he brings that energy and he brings that, headspace, brought that into Mythbusters. and continued all the way through Mythbusters. After he concluded Mythbusters and obviously started his own thing, I think he actually tested out like the Iron Man jetpack thing that they have, where it's like they have this jetpack on the back and you have thrusters on your hands, and you can fly around. And so yeah, he is really he is an icon in the nerd space because he is such a nerd and he geeks out over this kind of stuff and and you can tell he's really passionate about it and that's what makes him so great and what makes him such an icon with it.
And since then, Norm and Joey and I love to talk about the fact that, like, we have all watched, all three of us, all of the extended edition behind the scenes Lord of the Rings footage and regular
Oh.
edition behind the scenes Lord of the Rings footage. We watch all of that stuff at least twice each. And so when we go to Weta, that's part of our institutional knowledge. What's hilarious to us is whenever we talk about it, no one at Weta has ever watched any of that stuff, especially Richard Taylor. So he doesn't remember saying half the things we remember from those behind the scenes stuff. But there is a way in which it sort of also feels like, having watched all that stuff so much and been so in love with it, and then going to Weta and being welcomed into that family and being held by the love that is Weta Workshop, it sort of feels like we did kind of work on Lord of the Rings. Not quite, but like a little bit of a simulacrum of to know how loving that family is. And that family is so abiding. I was recently at a con with Elijah Wood, who is still just like, I've met him a couple of times. He's one of the nicest celebrities I have ever spent time with. And like, that's his family, man. You can really feel that sense of love from that production, and it's
Fun fact, someone in my family, yeah, someone close in my immediate family, actually got to meet Elijah Wood as well, and even was gaming with him. Elijah Wood is a gamer, and they actually got to game with him, which was really cool. I thought that was really cool. Like you get to game with Frodo. How cool is that?
abiding and really inspiring. Oh, Ingalls says, Ingels, Ingels, Ingels. I'm a big Blade Runner fan, and I know this question is a tough nut, but in which sci-fi future that we've seen do you think we will end up?
I have my own theory. I want to hear Ab's first to see how close he is to my theory.
Every Black Mirror episode. There was a tweet recently in which someone said Black Mirror can be summed up as one British dude wondering if his mom was a robot. It's a reason, actually, that I find it difficult to watch Black Mirror. I can watch like one. If I'm going to watch 2 episodes, I need like 2 weeks between them.
Eh.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I want Star Trek future. I want Star Trek. I want that utopia.
Never happened.
Everyone should have food. Everyone should have shelter. That's the world Star Trek lives in. I don't care if they work. Everyone should have food and everyone should have shelter. We have enough of both for everyone. The only reason everyone doesn't have food and shelter is because it's profitable for some people not to have food and shelter. That's terrible
exactly
to me.
right.
I want them all to have food and shelter. Oh, yeah, this is one I want to.
Okay, so I actually haven't seen Black Mirror. I haven't seen any episodes of Black Mirror, so I'm not quite. I'm familiar with the idea that it's basically it's a series of different each episode's different story, and it kind of shows like a futuristic dystopian futures, and so I understand the concept behind Black Mirror, but having not seen that. Honestly, if it feels so often, I feel like we're actually going into an idiocracy future. So, for those of you in chat who don't know what Idiocracy is, Idiocracy was a movie It was probably made about 15 years ago, maybe, possibly a bit longer, possibly a bit more than that, um, by Mike Judge, who is the creator of the Beavis and Butthead and King of the Hill series, TV shows. He did a film where an average, ordinary guy. He was in, he was in the military, but he was like a supply clerk, and he was just completely average across the board. Him and a prostitute who was also deemed to be oh, it's 2006. Okay, so about 20 years ago. Little, not quite 20 years ago. So I was pretty close. Uh, they, they are part of an experiment to essentially cryogenically freeze them and the whole principle is, they can get they could take their best of the best and the best soldiers and they can cryogenically freeze them and keep them in stasis for as long as necessary. And then they can break them out of cryostasis whenever they're needed to go on a high profile mission. And then when they're done, they stick them back in the fridge. And through a series of events, um, these two, they go into cryogenic stasis, and then the entire project gets canned, and they are essentially forgotten about, and they are lost to time, essentially. Um, and then probably about maybe 400 years into the future, it was perhaps uh, the uh, 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 the HUDs open just because of happenstance. And the world has changed to such a degree that commercialism and um, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, it honestly, if I was going to label it, Idiocracy is almost like Brain Rot the movie. Everything is about commercialism, like everything's branded. It's all about brand hype. Uh, the intelligence level of the population writ large. This is the entirety of the population is reduced to that of like elementary school people. Even though there's still like quote unquote modern technology, their fundamental intelligence level, their IQ level is about that of an elementary school student. And it's all commercialized and influenced by pop culture and it and the lead character is just your average guy from a he's got what's considered average intelligence, which means in the world of idiocracy he's like a genius. This is a society that ultimately one of their problems that they cannot surmount is they can't figure out why crops are not growing, and that's because they are watering their crops with what amounts to as that the movie's version of Gatorade, because as the branding says, it has electrolytes, which is what plants need or what plants crave. And so it's all about commercialism, where these big companies like this Gatorade-esque company and Costco, like they are the predominant businesses and they kind of run everything, but everybody is stupid. The in the movie they said that the number one hit film within this movie was called Ass, and that's exactly what it was. It was like 90 or 120 minutes of literally just an ass on the screen, and the whole audience is sitting there, packed house, just sitting there laughing their asses off at that what amounts to a still image of an ass. So as frightening as it sounds, like to a degree, that feels like the kind of direction that we're going in some respects, because I see, when I see the youth of today's society, they're all about getting TikTok, they're all about doing, with the Instagram reels, and I've done a few videos before today, uh, where Gen Z and maybe some millennial are asked very basic questions that literally anyone should know. Something as simple as what continent are we currently on? Bearing in mind this video takes place in the United States. What continent are we on? What countries border the United States? Who fought in the Civil War? Things like this, like extremely basic stuff. And these people can't answer it. They just go, what? I don't know. I don't know that stuff. And it's stuff like that makes me think that we're going in this direction. Now, there was another film that I saw. This one isn't really sci-fi, but this one, it it depressed me how somewhat realistic it was with our modern society. And this was a movie that actually just came out not very long ago. It was only a couple years ago, called Don't Look Up. It was starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence. This one, it wasn't exactly sci-fi. It was supposed to take place in the modern age. It was about, you know, a couple of scientists that discover a meteor is course to basically obliterate her. And while there was a very heavy dose of satire, it was injected like without question. The writers of this film did inject a very heavy dose of unbelievable satire. It's like this is something. This is kind of satire that would not actually happen, where like the president and the chief of staff behaved in a way that was absolutely unrealistic. Chief of staff in particular was the president's son, and he acted like a dude bro the entire time. That wouldn't happen. I understand that, but the par- parts of it where corporate interest was swaying governmental decisions involving saving the entire planet and the repercussions that come from that, and how it was initially just laughed off and mocked on social media, and how it was politicized, where the president was in a this was during a campaign season for the president, and the president was using it to try and further her reelection campaign by telling people, don't believe your own lying eyes about this giant earth killing meteor coming. And at the end of the day, like, it depressed me because I could see a big chunk of this, that what occurred in this movie, actually happening in modern day because of the way we are, you know, because of the way, especially the youth, are so injected into social media, and how everything is done for clicks and for clout. That was actually pretty depressing for me. I mean, it might sound a little hypocritical coming from me because I'm streaming on Twitch right now and I post clips of my stream on YouTube, but I'm doing what I do on Twitch here. I'm doing this for fun. Um, I'm not getting paid for this. I don't have anywhere near enough followers yet to be able to even try to monetize this channel. I'm doing this for fun. And as I've said before, if I can monetize it, I consider that a bonus, but I do this for fun because I like, talking to people here on this platform, uh, looking at different things and getting different viewpoints on them, and just having interesting conversations and learning interesting things. Um, so but in that respect, I do kind of separate myself a little bit from people that are chasing clout and chasing clicks and stuff like that. Oh, so yeah, again, I kind of went off on a little bit tangent there. But yeah, so that's kind of the sci-fi feature that I'm afraid we're kind of heading towards, is idiocracy. And if you haven't seen it yet and you're kind of curious, check it out. It's an interesting movie. It's got a good cast in it. It's got Terry Crews in it. If that helps. Uh, and it's an interesting and kind of fun movie. Um, you feel ill. I hope it's not because of what I was just talking about that made you feel ill. Let's get back to what. Well, uh, you know what? You're right. Uh, that's something else. I felt that too. We are moving towards. You're not wrong about going towards Wally. Um, it almost feels like a combination of Idiocracy and Wally, because with Wally, the consumerism is far more prevalent in its story. It's all about consumerism. Whereas with Idiocracy, it was all about the intelligence, like basically the intelligence level of the populace writ large going down, because essentially what they said in the beginning of the movie is the smart people were not breeding because of reasons that they did explain. Whereas the stupid people bred like rabbits, and so it was stupid people that took over essentially. Wall-E is like it was all about, by and large, consumerism to the nth degree. And said consumerism was causing abject laziness in people, i.e., the passengers that were on that ship in Wally. So yes, that's I do agree. I feel like it's a combination of those two. Like if you were to take those two, mash them together, I think that's the direction we're going. Because the people in Wally weren't stupid. The captain was, but I think that was more for comedic value. I don't think he was like I don't think he was representative of all the people on the ship. The people on the ship were stupid. They were just lazy. And I mean, the entire movie was 100% a commentary on how mass consumerism like that leads to laziness. When everything is being done for them by robots, it leads to laziness where people can't even walk anymore. They are just these anamorphic blobs confined to a floating chair. They don't even change their clothes. They push a button and the color changes on their clothes and they get drinks delivered to them. Yeah, I definitely see that as being part of the direction that we're going to because automation is getting more and more prevalent. So yeah, you were 100% right. To a degree, we are moving towards a Wally future. So give me the cute Wally robot and give me Eve.
Answer. Hold on, let me just see. Yeah. So SRMIII 90 for me says several months ago you were wearing a Cliff Booth shirt and said that you didn't normally dress as villains. I was curious why you felt Cliff Booth was a villain in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I view him as a kind of anti-hero or villain. I I don't bandy around the term myself anti-hero enough to have an opinion on anti-hero versus villain, but I will talk about why I think Cliff is villainous. I think Once Upon a Time in the Hollywood that it is partly a meditation on cool. It is a meditation on the coolness of the movie star versus the coolness. So the coolness of the movie star played by Leo DiCaprio and the coolness of his stuntman played by Brad Pitt, Cliff Booth. And the movie has an opinion that Cliff Booth is 10 times as cool as Leo DiCaprio's character. The movie makes that really clear, that it thinks of Cliff as authentic cool and Leo DiCaprio's character as unauthentic cool. A little.
It's I got the feeling more that Cliff was Cliff was definitely more physical. They made his character like it was almost like the thing for Leonardo DiCaprio's character is his character was the decline of his career. So with Leonardo DiCaprio's character, it was him it was more him contending with what seemed like the twilight of his career. And he's been wanting to be, in acting, he's wanted to be an actor forever. And so, the beginning of the movie is about him losing his star is losing its shine ever since he left ever since he left his breakout television role. Things have been drying up. He's been only been able to find bit parts or parts of villains, which back then, being a villain wasn't considered a good part to play. He was considered disposable. They called it the heavy, meaning you're the big bad for that singular episode. And once you're defeated, you're forgotten about. Villains are treated much differently in modern Hollywood today. So his was more of like a redemption arc, or like a comeback arc, because a big part of it was him playing the bad guy in this new Western and how he was sort of trying to reinvent himself and kind of bring himself back from the pit that he'd found himself in. Whereas Cliff was kind of along for the ride. He had his own thing going, but Cliff was a much more physical character. He was one that was doing the physical fighting. Um, so I don't necessarily agree with what Adam is saying here because I can I see them the way that they worked with the two characters was was different from what he's portraying. And as you know, in the entirety of the movie, with all the other characters that are involved, was a love letter to Hollywood of old. But I don't agree with the way Adam's assessing it. I don't think that's correct.
More messed up in the head. But I think it also has this idea about cool being slightly psychopathic or sociopathic. We're given some previous history about Cliff. He is supposed to have killed his ex-wife or his
Correct.
dead wife. He is supposed to have offed her with a spear gun. And we get to witness what looks like the moment just before he shoots her. And we also see the expression. We hear her. She's not a sympathetic character, not written as a sympathetic character. And we see him clearly contemplating murdering her. And they don't show the murder. But I feel like in that moment, it makes it clear that Cliff's cool stems from something like a lack of empathy or something approaching sociopathy.
I disagree with that. I very much disagree with that. With the whole thing with Cliff supposedly killing his wife, that's a small part within the movie. That that was just used as a plot point why he wasn't getting hired for work as a stuntman in Hollywood. Is because he had this, because there was this supposed stigma of that he, supposedly, they unproven, but everybody is under the belief that he killed his wife, and that's why he wasn't getting work as a stuntman. It's a part of one of the scenes, and it was actually a flashback scene in all reality. Beyond that, the whole thing about Cliff supposedly killing his wife really doesn't isn't there for the rest of the movie. He doesn't exhibit sociopathic behavior. He actually goes to Spawn Ranch, which was an old movie, like outdoor movie studio, uh, to check on the owner of the ranch because, and I may be doing some spoilers here, so if you don't want to hear about this, mute for 30 seconds or so. Uh, the Charles Manson cult has essentially taken over Spawn Ranch, and the owner of the ranch is still there. He's not being abused or anything, but the cult of Charles Manson has taken over Spawn Ranch. which is true to real life. In real life, Charles Manson's followers did live on Svallet Ranch. And he actually goes to see the owner of Swan Ranch and actually, you know, will not be deterred when when there's some token efforts to deter him. He just kind of keeps going. And but he goes to check on him to make sure he's okay, that he's not being taken advantage of. That's not really sociopathic behavior. And, in terms of working with Leonardo DiCaprio's character, he does it because they've worked with him for years. He is getting paid, but he also considers Leonardo DiCaprio a friend. Um, he's got his dog that he clear that he's firm and strong with his dog, but obviously he loves his dog. So I very much disagree that uh, uh, that Cliff Booth is a sociopathic character. Yes, he does get extremely violent at the end of the movie. That was kind of, I think, probably a selling point, is that there is an extremely violent scene at the climax of the movie. But I mean, it was completely justified. It's not like he was unjustified. He didn't just go flying off into a blind rape or something. He was defending himself. And also, it was established that he was probably some kind of special forces in the military previously. So he's got the skill. He has those significantly violent skill sets available to him, which lend itself to stunt work, stunt performing. So yeah, I'm sorry. I very much disagree with that about this. That Cliff Booth was a sociopath. I just don't see that whatsoever.
And when I combine that, I know that like he's tripping balls at the end of the movie when the Manson people come and he destroys them. But the two shots of one, him contemplating killing his wife, and then the second one of him taking that young woman from the Manson family and just beating the living crap out of her, those two shots are they don't fill me with anything approaching any warmth about that character. That might make him an anti-hero. To me, it makes him feel a lot more like a villain. Thank you
Yeah,
for
no,
watching that video. Are you as
yeah, like I said, I very much disagree with that sentiment. That the scene in the end that he's talking about, this was three members of the Manson cult that had broken into Leonardo DiCaprio's home while Cliff was there, and it was three of them versus hit. Two of them had knives, one of them had a gun. This is a man who is a militarily trained soldier, and there are three threats. Yes, he went super violent in eliminating them. And yes, he was high on hallucinogenic at the time. But I mean, again, he was defending himself against three armed people. No, that is not sociopathic. You can call me anti-hero. Anti-hero is perfectly fine. Uh, that is a perfectly fine descriptor of his character. Um, but no, like calling his character sociopathic, no, that is doing a disservice to the character. I absolutely disagree with that sentiment. It's in every way. He is not a sociopath. You could say what you want about when he killed his wife. Uh, it's we get to see in the movie one what 30-second clip that he was referencing where he's looks like he's about to kill his wife and then it cuts away. Um, that doesn't make him a sociopath. I mean, plenty of people just that are not sociopaths snap uh, after enough pressure. I mean, as the saying, you know, like the Frank Castle said in the Daredevil show, all it takes is one bad day. That's all it takes.